ready to work with multiplying algebraic expressions. So what I want you to do first is to look at what it says up here. List the factors of 3 times 2x. Now remember, the word factors means things that are multiplied together. Okay, let's see if you came up with the same thing that I do. You should actually have 3 factors, not just 2. The first factor is 3. I'm going to separate my factors with commas. And 2x really means 2 times x. So 2 is a factor and x is a factor. So we denote multiplication using the star, but we can also represent multiplication by saying 2x without a star in between. So looking at the next set of expressions, these 5 expressions here, which of these expressions have the same factors as this expression on the top? Okay, have you thought through that? So let's take a look. 6 times 3x. Well, 6 is already 3 times 2, and there's another 3 factor, so this has too many factors, and it's not the same factors as up here. 6x, well, 6 is 3 times 2, and there's an x factor, so this does have the same factors as 3 times 2x. Well, here's 3 times 2, but this has x times x, and there's only one x factor up here, so there's too many x factors in that expression. Here's 3 as a factor, x, and 2, so that has the same factors as our original expression. Here's 1x, and again 6 is 3 times 2, so this one also has the same factors. So looking through at the 3 that have the same factors, which one of those would you say is the simplest way we could write that expression? Hopefully you said that this is the one that is written in the simplest form. So here's 2 more expressions down here at the bottom of the page. Think about how you would simplify those expressions. If you need more time, hit the pause button. So I'm ready now. 4 times 5, if those are factors, could be simplified to 20. And I need an x factor. So 20x would be the simplest way of writing that expression. Negative 2 and 7, if I multiply those two together, is a negative 14. And I need the variable m as part of that simplified expression. So there's some ways to simplify those expressions. Now I'm going to introduce us to another expression. So we'll get these out of here. I'll make this one just a little bit harder. So we have 3x times 2x. And again, what I want you to do first is list the factors of that expression. You should have 4 factors. 3 is a factor. X is a factor, 2 is a factor, and then we have another x as a factor. So even though it's the same letter, you do want to list it twice because we see 2 x's in that expression up there. So I'm going to give you some choices to see which of these expressions have the same factors as the one on the top here. Those of you who are still using x's to mean multiply are really going to have to change that now. We will often use x as our variable, although we will use other letters as well. So think about which one of those have the same factors as the expression at the top of the page. The first one, there's a 3 and a 2, but there's only one x factor here, and our expression had 2 x factors. So this is not the same. 6 is already 3 times 2, and there's another 3 factor in this expression, so it's not the same. Right, 6 can take care of our 3 times 2, times x, so this expression has the same as our original. 6, there's 3 times 2. X squared is a shortcut for writing x times x, so this is the same as our original. And here's 3 times 2 times x, so the order's not important, but this is certainly the same as our original factors. Now, which one of those 3 that we found would you say is the simplest form of writing the final answer? And hopefully you pick this as the one that is the simplest way to write that answer. So let's try a couple more where you're simplifying. Try those two. And if you're not ready, use the pause button. So 4 times 5, that would be 20, times m times p. When I'm writing it in simplest form, I don't use the star in between. I'll just write it as 20 mp, but it does mean 20 times m times p. In simplest form, this is just 7. K times k, written in simplest form, would be k squared. Now, one thing we might talk about is that over here we had 4 times 5. Here we have 7 times... What number is the coefficient of k? Well, remember that the coefficient of k, if it's not written there, is a 1. So 7 times 1 is 7. So that works there. Now we're going to try 3 more examples for simplifying with multiplication. And we're going to go through verifying to see how our answers look. So here's negative p times 4p and I want you to both simplify and verify these answers. Because you need to verify, you should probably hit the pause button. Okay, let's work through these now. Now, there's a negative here, and again, when there's no number there, that means that's really a negative 1 that's a coefficient. So negative 1 times 4 would be a negative 4, and p times p we would write as p squared. Here there is no numerical coefficient. Again, we can assume they're ones, but over here we don't want to write the 1 because we're trying to simplify this. So I have p times p is p squared m. Now the order you write things in is not important, so it's totally okay if you wrote m and then p squared. Notice that the square is only applying to the p, that there were 2 p factors and only 1 m factor here. Negative 3 times 6 would be a negative 18. I've got x times x, so that's x squared. And we have an m factor. All right, so now let's go back through and verify these. And we'll verify by picking a number. So I'm going to pick p is equal to 5. Then we'll substitute 5 into the original expression. So there was a negative p, so it's negative 5, times 4 times p. So when you're writing this, you do have to put the extra time symbol in. And we want to find out if that's the same thing we get as when we put it in the answer, the result, which was negative 4 times 5 squared. So over here on the calculator, negative 5 times 4 times 5 is negative 100. And negative 4 times 5 squared is also negative 100. Since those two match, we say that our answer over here is correct. Now, when you're doing this for a graded problem or a quiz, this is how I want you to show your work, so I know what you wrote in the calculator and the answer you got, and what you wrote in your result in the calculator and the answer that you got. Right, so let's try the next one. Again, we'll pick values. We have 2 variables, so we have to pick 2 different values. So let's keep p equal to 5 and m equal to 4. Write that in the original expression, which was p, that's 5, times m times p. And in the answer, so I'll pick this last answer here, 4 times p is 5 squared. And now I'll go to my calculator. When you're checking your answers, you want things to be fairly easy. So using a calculator to do your work, clear, there we go, should make it easy to check your answers. So 5 times 4 times 5 is 100, and is also 100. Interesting. And again, those 2 answers match, so those answers check. Basically what I'm saying is that this thing that I started with is equal to this expression that I got when I was done, which is why these 2 numbers have to be equal over here. All right, so now we need to pick some other numbers. So I'm going to pick x equal to 7, and m, well, we'll keep m equal to 4. Remember that we are not going to pick 0, 1, or 2 when we do our checks. So start with the original expression. And then also substitute into your answer, your result. Let's see if I can clear my calculator. Here we go. All right, so our first answer is negative 3,528. And our second one matches. Notice when you're doing this that your second one, your simplified one, is always a lot easier to put into the calculator, which is one of the reasons why we like to do that. Now, I often use a check to say, hey, this worked. You can use anything you want. If it's a tough problem, I might use a smiley face, like, wow, that really did work. Sometimes when I'm doing my homework, I will write down pick x equals 7 and m equals 4 so that I remember. And then I'll go over and do the work in my calculator and not bother to write all of this stuff down. So I need that for when you're graded for how to do it, but you might not need to write that down for every problem that you do on your homework. But the other thing I like to do is put a little check mark next to the problem so that I know that that answer was checked and that it did work. So you can save yourself a little time on your homework by not writing all of this out. Now this is important because one of the things we do in this class is try and make sure that when we do our homework, we do it correctly. So we check our answers in the back of the book, or we check on the discussion forum. But now we have a new way of checking where we don't have to wait for the discussion forum. We'll be able to check our own answers as we're doing our homework.